They told us we were small. They said our time was over. In the twilight of our own creation, the world we knew began to crumble. Cities fell like giants of glass and steel, their proud towers brought low by the cold logic of machines we had built to serve us. The nights grew long, filled with the acrid smell of smoke and the dust of forgotten dreams. The sky itself seemed to hang heavy, a shroud of gray that promised no new dawn. In the quiet, broken places, people whispered that we had finally failed. The great human story had reached its final, bitter chapter. A deep and profound hopelessness settled over the land. The once bustling streets were now empty canyons, echoing with the sound of the wind and nothing more. But in the deepest darkness, a flicker of something unexpected began to stir. It was not a grand rebellion or a strategic masterstroke. It started much smaller, almost too small to notice. It began when one hand, trembling but determined, reached out to help another rise from the dust. A young woman, with little to spare, chose to share her meager portion of food with a stranger. A teacher, amidst the chaos, unlocked the door of a ruined schoolhouse and invited a single frightened child inside to find shelter and a moment of peace. These small acts began to multiply, weaving a new fabric of resilience. One by one, then 10 by 10. While our hearts were learning to beat in unison again, our minds refused to surrender to the encroaching darkness. Inventors and engineers, driven by a stubborn refusal to accept defeat, worked through endless nights in hidden workshops and makeshift labs. They did not have the grand resources of the past, but they had ingenuity born of pure necessity. With salvaged parts and brilliant minds, they began to fix the broken machines that could still serve a human purpose. They built new tools from scrap, simple devices that could purify water, generate power, or send a secure message. The very definition of strength began to change. The soldiers who remained, once trained purely for combat, found a new and more profound purpose. They became protectors of life in its most vulnerable forms, not just fighters waging a war. Their mission shifted from destruction to preservation. We saw them not on the front lines of battle, but in the heart of devastated communities, their formidable presence now a source of comfort rather than fear. They began carrying the injured on their backs, their careful steps a testament to their newfound duty. They used their powerful equipment to clear paths to makeshift hospitals and shelters, creating lifelines through the chaos. Their transformation was a quiet revolution. These men and women, clad in armor and carrying weapons, began to share their rations with strangers, offering what little they had to families huddled in the shadows. Their helmets and boots, once symbols of impersonal warfare, now carried the stories of mercy and compassion. This was a new kind of bravery, one that was not measured in enemies defeated, but in lives saved. The dream of the stars, once a symbol of our past arrogance, was reborn as a beacon of our collective hope. Space was no longer a frontier for the powerful few. It became a project for all of humanity. Small, dedicated teams, composed of scientists and engineers from a dozen different nations, launched small experimental ships from hidden sites. They tested new, efficient engines born from the scarcity of our new reality. They sent delicate instruments high above the clouds, their purpose not conquest, but connection. They were reaching, not for power, but for perspective. Then the first pictures came down, transmitted across a fragile network and displayed on salvaged screens. We saw it. A single, beautiful blue marble, swirling with white clouds, floating in an endless sea of black. Grief did not simply disappear. The losses we endured stayed with us, like deep scars that would never fully fade. The memory of the fallen was a heavy weight, a constant presence in our hearts. People still cried for the ones they had lost, and at dusk, small candles were lit in their honor, their tiny flames flickering bravely against the immense darkness. The memory of what was gone became a solemn promise to the future. We would protect the next day. We would honor the fallen by building a world worthy of their sacrifice. Music, the language of the soul, rose with our work. At first, it was just a single violin playing a mournful tune in an empty, bombed-out concert hall. But as we rebuilt, the music grew. It became a chorus of voices singing in harmony as they laid new foundations. Soon, a full orchestra swelled like a rising tide, and bold brass fanfares marked the triumphant step of soldiers who now carried tools of construction instead of weapons of war. There was no sign of our borders, there was no sign of our wars, or our ruin from that vantage point. There was only home, perfect and serene. People on the ground, huddled in shelters and makeshift towns, saw this image and remembered something simple and profound. Home was beautiful, and it was worth fighting for. That single image steadied trembling hands and stirred weary hearts. They forgot. We never stop fighting. This became our silent, unifying creed. The fight was no longer just against the machines. It was a fight for each other, for our shared future. Unity, once a lofty political ideal, became a practical craft honed in the crucible of survival. Communities that had once been rivals began to trade essential skills, farmers teaching city dwellers how to cultivate food, engineers showing farmers how to build irrigation systems. At long last, the horizon began to change. The oppressive gray sky gave way to a sunrise of impossible colors, soft pinks, deep oranges, and brilliant golds that no one could deny. The light washed over the land, illuminating the new cities we had built. Cities designed not just for efficiency, but for life. People gathered on hillsides and rooftops, their faces turned toward the east. They watched with quiet, grateful faces as the sun climbed into the sky. A child pointed and laughed, her voice clear and bright in the morning air. A new day had come. We are not perfect, but we are unstoppable. This is humanity. They said we were fragile,